4 parts from Mrs. Puff's Dark Secrets. So take your notepads if you don't want to sit back and relax. And let's see, credits to Alex Bale. He may say a lot of bad words, so okay.
This is not Mrs. Puff. You may think she's just SpongeBob's boating teacher, but you'd be very, very wrong. For years, she's been running from her dark and mysterious past, but it's finally caught up to her. And behind it all is a mastermind who's been secretly controlling her life and psychologically torturing her. If you guys thought my last 2 theories were mind-blowing, get ready for my biggest conspiracy yet. This is the Mrs. Puff theory. I gotta start off by saying, wow, the reaction to my last 2 SpongeBob theories has been insane.
How does she know? How does she know?
Squilliam, you lying, deceiving, who is that handsome young devil?
I'm glad you guys are enjoying my ridiculously deep dives into the show. I mean, I have to watch so much SpongeBob and read so much of the Wikipedia to put these theories together, but it's worth it because the writers actually take the time to set these things up. Now, a lot of people have been asking, Alex, how do you come up with these crazy conspiracy theories? Well, I always start these theories by looking for the moments in the show that seem to be implying more than they're letting on. Like I've said before, SpongeBob is a weird show with lots of abstract humor, but I can usually understand the intent the writers had behind a weird joke. But then there's stuff like this.
I hope I still remember how to do this.
Still? Remember?
Yeah.
And it's so confusing and weird that it feels like the writers are trying to imply something beyond just weirdness for the sake of comedy. And nowhere in the show is there more of these moments than with Mrs. Puff. And once I started looking into it, it led me down the deepest rabbit hole I've ever seen from this show. So, let's begin. Uh-oh. Looks like I'm getting hacked by a hacker. I knew this would happen if I got too close to the truth. Well, it's a good thing this video is sponsored by NordVPN. If you're watching this video, then you're on the internet, which means at any moment you could be hacked by a cyber criminal. All of your privacy, all of your personal information, the hackers can get it all. They're probably hacking you right now. What are you even doing watching this video? You have to get out of here. Get the hell out of here! Unless you use NordVPN, a service that can protect your privacy while you're on the internet. You can rest easy knowing all of your communications and personal data are safe when you use NordVPN. And you can even use NordVPN on up to 6 devices. You can also use NordVPN to unlock videos or shows that you would normally only be able to watch in certain countries. Finally, I can watch The Big Bang Theory on Netflix. Here's what I looked like before I used NordVPN, and here's what I look like now. Go to nordvpn.com/AlexBale or use code AlexBale to start a 2-year plan. You'll even get an additional free month. And if you're not satisfied, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. Now I can finally make my YouTube SpongeBob conspiracy theories without the fear of being hacked. Thanks, NordVPN. Now without further ado, let's begin the theory.
Mrs. Puff's Dark Past, Part
Mrs. Puff is a boating school teacher in Bikini Bottom. She's passed all of her students except for one, SpongeBob SquarePants. He's taken her driver's test hundreds of times, and he always ends up failing it and causing destruction and chaos that usually ends up with Mrs. Puff going to jail, despite it not really being her fault. We also know that she was once married, but her husband was killed by fishermen.
That's my driving teacher, Mrs. Puff.
Mrs. Puff? Oh, she's married.
Oh no, Mr. Krabs, she's single.
Then what happened to Mr. Puff?
She doesn't like to talk about it.
Throughout the show, there are moments like this that seem to be hinting at her having a dark, mysterious past. And in Season 2, Episode 10, No Free Rides, we get the biggest clue about who Mrs. Puff really is. After SpongeBob fails the driving test yet again, Mrs. Puff has just had it with him and ends up just giving up and giving him his license even though he never really passed. She quickly realizes that this is a horrible idea and he'll probably end up destroying the entire town.
So much destruction. This reporter asks, why? Local consensus places the blame on this negligent, selfish driving instructor who...
Remember this clip, because it's going to be very important later on. And then she says this insanely revealing line.
What have I done? Everyone will know that I let him slide through school. I'll have to move to a new city, start a new boating school with a new name. No, not again.
No, not again. Come come on, it's like they're just begging someone to make a theory about this. So we now know Mrs. Puff was originally from a different town, she used to own a different boating school, and Mrs. Puff isn't even her real name. There's something in her past that she ran away from. Now, there's been some debate over whether she's actually referring to a new name for herself or for her boating school, but I do think she's talking about her own name, because if she's trying to run away from something in her past, she wouldn't start a new boating school with her real name in the title. Now, when she says again, I don't think she's just referring to starting a new life.
Everyone will know that I let him slide through school. Not again.
I think at her previous boating school, she had a terrible student just like SpongeBob who she prematurely gave a license to, and it led to something so terrible happening that she had to run away and start a whole new life. In Season 3, Episode 5, Doing Time, we get a flashback to when she first opened up the school.
Where did I go wrong? With the opening of my new boating school, I pledge that as long as a student is willing to learn, I shall never give up.
Hi, I'm SpongeBob SquarePants.
With the opening of this new boating school, let's keep in mind that this is not her first boating school. Maybe the whole reason she's making this pledge now at her second school is because she gave up on a student at her previous school, and that led to her having to run away and start a new life. She's pledging to never make the same mistake again. Now let's skip ahead to one of the newer episodes. Season 12, Episode 21, Lighthouse Louie, where Mrs. Puff has SpongeBob organize all the stuff she keeps in the school's lighthouse. There's lots of interesting things hidden in the background, but the first thing that caught my eye was this file labeled Mrs. Puff. It makes sense for a teacher to have files on all their students, but why would she have a file about herself? But let's remember, she's not Mrs. Puff. That's a fake identity she created, and I'm willing to bet all of her fake identification documents are in this file. Back in No Free Rides, she just gives SpongeBob a license that she already had for him. So she clearly makes these licenses and would probably know how to make fake identifications. But that's not the only hint about Mrs. Puff's past in this lighthouse. There is something in here that directly confirms all of this. As SpongeBob swallows all of Mrs. Puff's junk, we see something very interesting for only a few frames. Deranged boat teacher makes getaway. 10 seasons later, and the creators are still hiding stuff about Mrs. Puff fleeing her old life. It might not look like it at first, but we actually get a ton of new information from this newspaper. This is from the New Kelp Post, which tells us Mrs. Puff originally lived in New Kelp City. Then there's a caption that reads, distracts authorities with balloon animals. And do you remember that clip from the beginning?
I hope I still remember how to do this. Yeah.
So whenever Mrs. Puff makes a getaway or commits a crime, she leaves behind a balloon animal to distract the police. I'm telling you guys, these writers don't just do stuff randomly, they have reasons for everything. And the most damning piece of evidence from this newspaper is actually the picture of Mrs. Puff. Kind of a strange photo, right? We have seen this exact same photo of her before. In the episode No Free Rides, when she imagines what would happen if SpongeBob got his license.
Local consensus places the blame on this negligent, selfish driving instructor.
This means that this isn't just her imagination of what might happen. This is also her remembering what happened when she lived in New Kelp City and prematurely gave one of her students a license. And I'm willing to bet that the fish reporting the news is the exact same one who reported about her in New Kelp City. Let me explain. We know from the episode Whatever Happened to SpongeBob that reporters from the Bikini Bottom News can also work for the New Kelp City News. But the real reason I think this is because of his hair. In the entire show, we have never seen this fish reporter with hair before. Why would the creators go out of their way to add that detail? Because Mrs. Puff isn't imagining him as he looks now. She's remembering him from years ago when he used to have hair, when he reported about her in New Kelp City. Mrs. Puff has been running from her past ever since, and is now forced to relive her experience with an unteachable student through SpongeBob. But reliving this trauma has pushed her to the point of complete insanity. And trust me when I say that you have no idea how delusional she actually is.
Bold on the outside, tech packed inside.
Another running gag throughout the series is Mrs. Puff's occasional nervous breakdowns or moments of insanity because of SpongeBob, and they get more severe as the show continues. At first, she did care for SpongeBob, but in the newer episodes, she literally tries to kill SpongeBob just to get him out of her life. Even SpongeBob just walking up to her gives her severe PTSD.
Hi, Mrs. Puff.
Hit the brakes! SpongeBob! Watch the tree! Laugh!
Wait, Mrs. Puff, we're not driving.
But these mostly seem like just one-off moments, and for the most part, Mrs. Puff is still a functioning member of society, right? I'm going to show you that she's actually much, much more insane and delusional than you may think. And some of the episodes she's in take place entirely in her own head. If we're talking about how insane Mrs. Puff is, there is no better place to start than the episode Doing Time. Once again, SpongeBob fails the boating test and causes destruction and chaos, which leads to Mrs. Puff going to jail. SpongeBob keeps breaking into jail to try and bust her out, but Mrs. Puff actually prefers being in jail over teaching him. We actually get another interesting line about Mrs. Puff's past in this episode.
Okay, you can do this, Puff. You can get through this without losing your sanity. Oh, that's a road we don't want to go down again.
So we know that Mrs. Puff has lost her sanity in the past, probably from her previous terrible student, but it seems like she's recovered since then, except in this episode she has a complete mental breakdown. SpongeBob keeps appearing in impossible places until she gets thrown into solitary confinement, where each wall of the room transforms into a giant SpongeBob face. And then the episode ends in a way that's so weird and confusing that it rivals the infamous gorilla episode ending. As Mrs. Puff freaks out, she's suddenly transported back into the beginning of the episode when SpongeBob was taking the test, except this time SpongeBob gets arrested instead of her.
No, this is not a good time. No.
I can't believe it. It was all a dream. I'm not going to jail.
Why would you go to jail? You already did your time.
Forget it.
So what's really going on in this episode? Was the ending all in her head? Is Mrs. Puff just caught in an endless loop? I think this entire episode is inside of Mrs. Puff's head, and she's actually on the outside the whole time, but she's been imagining herself inside of prison. I can explain. Listen closely to what the police officer tells Mrs. Puff.
I'm not going to jail.
Why would you go to jail? You already did your time.
Why would you go to jail? You already did your time. And then revealing she's still in a prison uniform despite being on the outside. So this scene is obviously inside of her head, which means everything we see is symbolic. And if we can understand the symbolism of it, we can understand what's really going on with Mrs. Puff. Notice how she's suddenly wearing a black and white striped prison uniform, even though the entire episode she's been wearing this orange jumpsuit. Why would the creators go to the extra effort to draw a whole new prison uniform for her? Well, we've seen her wear this black and white prison uniform before. The very first time she went to prison back in season 1, episode 7, Hall Monitor. So when the police officer says, "You've already done your time," he's referring to